This week on Days of Our Lives, Salem doesn't just celebrate Christmas. Salem weapon it, because while the town strings lights and trims the Horton tree, the Demera crypt is about to crack open like a pressure cooker. We've got 3 major returns, a mistletoe kiss that could shatter a relationship, and a crypt rescue that doesn't end with hugs, it ends with ambulances. And the most chilling part? The captives may walk free, but the nightmare doesn't. It simply changes shape. So today, we're breaking down everything we know for the week of December 22 to 26, what it means, what's being set up, and which character is about to pay the highest emotional price. On the surface, this looks like a classic Days of Our Lives holiday week. Returns, family reunions, warm lights, tradition. But structurally, this week is not about celebration. It's about contrast. Because Days is deliberately placing 2 worlds side by side, and daring the audience to compare them. On one side, we have the Horton house. A place filled with voices, laughter, shared history. A space where Christmas means connection, continuity, and survival through love. And on the other side? The Demera crypt. Cold, claustrophobic, built on secrets, suspicion, and decades of unresolved trauma. One space represents what Salem wants to be. The other represents what Salem actually is. And when those 2 worlds finally collide, when the crypt captives come out, this is the crucial point. Salem doesn't get relief. Salem gets fallout. Because freedom, on Days of Our Lives, is never clean. It doesn't restore people to who they were before. It exposes who they've become under pressure. This is the kind of week where characters don't simply recover from danger. They rearrange their loyalties. They reevaluate who matters, who can be trusted, and who they're willing to sacrifice for. And interestingly enough, that theme doesn't start in the crypt. It starts with a seemingly smaller, quieter storyline, Tate and Holly. Because while their conflict doesn't involve kidnappings or near-death experiences, it is still a test. A test of maturity, a test of priorities, and a test that's going to ripple outward far more than either of them realizes. Let's talk about Tate Black. Tate is facing academic probation, and yes, that's serious on its own. But what really matters here isn't the paperwork or the consequences. It's what probation represents emotionally. This is the moment where Tate can no longer hide behind charm, romance, or optimism. He can't smooth things over. He can't joke his way out of it. He can't promise that everything will be fine. For the first time in a long time, Tate has to look Holly in the eye and say, "I messed up." And unfortunately for Holly, that confession doesn't come alone. Because Tate isn't delivering one disappointment. He's delivering 2. Bad news number 1. His grades are in trouble. His future suddenly feels unstable. Bad news number 2. The Paris trip, the dream, the escape, the fantasy, may not happen at all. And if you're Holly Jonas, that second blow lands deeper than the first. Because Paris wasn't just a vacation. Paris was symbolic. It meant romance. It meant adventure. It meant proof that, no matter what else was going wrong, they were okay. So when Tate pulls out, Holly doesn't just hear disappointment. She hears something far more painful: "You're not my priority right now." And that's where this storyline gets complicated, because Tate's reasoning isn't selfish. In fact, it's responsible. Tate may choose to stay behind to support Rachel Black at Bayview during the holidays. That decision matters. It shows growth. It shows empathy. It shows a willingness to sacrifice personal happiness for someone who needs him. But here's the truth Days understands very well: growth often looks like betrayal to the people who are left behind. Because while Tate is choosing responsibility, Holly is absorbing the loss. And that sets up the real emotional question of this arc. Will Holly respect Tate's maturity, or will resentment quietly take root? Because resentment is where youthful disappointment transforms into adult-level damage. And while all of this is happening, there's one more layer: Rachel Black isn't calming down. She's drifting closer to danger. Rachel Black is not simply acting out. Rachel is searching for an exit. And that distinction matters. She feels trapped, controlled, watched, defined by other people's fears and mistakes. And into that emotional vacuum steps Sophia Choi. Spoilers suggest Rachel is hoping to escape with Sophia the next time Sophia goes on one of her so-called adventures. Now, in Salem, the word adventure is never innocent. Translated honestly, Sophia represents risk, secrecy, impulse. Sophia is not someone Rachel can safely follow. Sophia is a catalyst. And the pattern here is dangerously clear. Rachel feels confined and powerless. Sophia offers excitement and rebellion. Rachel mistakes chaos for freedom. That's a classic Days of Our Lives setup. Because characters who confuse escape with empowerment often pay the highest price. And this is exactly why Tate's involvement matters so much. Because Tate now occupies a pivotal role in Rachel's emotional orbit. He could become the stabilizing presence who helps Rachel feel seen, supported, and grounded, or the well-meaning influence who unintentionally gives Rachel the confidence to attempt something reckless. And hovering over all of this is Kristen DiMera. Kristen isn't just worried, she's unraveling. Rachel is the center of Kristen's universe. Her anchor. Her justification for everything she's ever done. So when the crypt storyline reaches its breaking point, and Kristen's emotions are already raw, feverish, and unstable, her fear for Rachel doesn't stay contained. It spills outward, and it pours gasoline on every conflict waiting to explode. Because on Days of Our Lives, the most dangerous ingredient isn't evil intent. It's desperation. Now we reach the epicenter of this week's chaos. The DiMera crypt. By the time we arrive here, the captives are already exhausted, physically, emotionally, psychologically. Trust is gone. Tempers are frayed. Fear has replaced reason. And then, Peter Blake appears. Or more accurately, Peter Blake gets trapped with them. And this is not just another person joining the lineup. This is a psychological shockwave. Because Peter Blake isn't simply someone from the past. Peter is a living reminder of everything the DiMera family tries to bury. Family betrayal, shifting loyalties, blood ties that feel more like curses than connections. His presence changes the air in the room. At first, Kristen is relieved, almost comforted, to see him. After all, he's her brother. A familiar face in an unfamiliar nightmare. But that relief doesn't last. Because Kristen isn't stable. She's feverish. She's emotionally raw. And her thoughts are consumed by one thing, Rachel. And fear has a way of mutating into paranoia. Very quickly, Kristen's mind starts filling in gaps. The timing feels wrong. Peter's arrival feels too convenient. And his past is impossible to ignore. So the questions begin to form, quietly at first, then louder. Did Peter stage his own kidnapping? Did he insert himself into this situation on purpose? And could he be connected to the entire DiMera nightmare unfolding above ground? This is the moment where Kristen's first instinct isn't reunion. It's suspicion. And in Salem, that suspicion isn't irrational. Because Peter Blake has never been innocent. And his history makes him the perfect suspect, or the perfect decoy. So this storyline isn't asking us for an answer yet. It's asking us to sit in the discomfort of the question, is Peter a victim, or a puppet master who planned to get caught? Both possibilities are dangerous, and both open the door to long-term fallout. Now add the pressure cooker effect, confinement, fear, old resentments, Kristen's emotional volatility, and suddenly, conflict doesn't stay verbal. Spoilers suggest Kristen physically attacks Peter. And that single act tells us everything we need to know about her mental state. This isn't strategy. This is panic. Later, when Kristen is asking Peter's forgiveness in the hospital, it confirms two critical things. Something violent and irreversible happened in the crypt. And Kristen realizes, too late, that fear drove her past the point of control. But even that moment of regret may not undo what's been set in motion. Because just as emotions are reaching their breaking point, The crypt turns from a psychological prison into a life-threatening one. Theo Carver doesn't just struggle in the crypt. He collapses. He appears poised to lose consciousness and strike his head. And this moment is crucial. Because this is where the storyline shifts genres. Up until now, the crypt has been about suspicion, power dynamics, and emotional warfare. Theo's collapse turns it into a medical emergency. This is no longer a situation that can be argued through. No more accusations. No more, who did this? No more positioning or posturing. The only question that matters becomes, can we get out before someone dies? A head injury in a confined space is terrifying. And it introduces real consequences, permanent ones. Theo's collapse also serves a deeper narrative purpose. It forces enemies into cooperation. People who distrust each other now have to act together. People who were blaming each other now have to support each other. Survival replaces suspicion, and that shift is what allows the rescue to move forward. Because at this point, time is no longer a luxury. It's a countdown. Rafe Hernandez has been working methodically to gain access to the crypt. Procedure, evidence, patience, and spoilers indicate that when the breakthrough finally comes, Rafe may not be alone. Cat Green may be with him. And that pairing is anything but accidental. Rafe represents law, order, and restraint. Cat represents instinct, risk, and intuition. If Cat is present when the crypt is breached, it suggests something important. Either Cat's involvement is essential to finding the crypt, unlocking it, or exposing how this nightmare was orchestrated. Or Cat is being deliberately positioned closer to the core of Demera chaos for what comes next. Either way, this rescue is not clean. It doesn't end with relief and applause. It ends with sirens. Because once the captives are freed, the consequences hit immediately. Multiple people are rushed to the hospital. Peter Blake, Kristen Demera, Theo Carver, and even those who appear stable, Tony, EJ, Chad, are subjected to medical evaluations. Not because they're visibly injured, but because captivity leaves invisible damage. This is classic Days of Our Lives storytelling. You survive the trap, but you don't escape the trauma. And when these characters walk out of the hospital, they won't just carry scars. They'll carry suspicions, grudges, and unfinished business that could reshape Salem long after the Christmas decorations come down. EJ Demera walking out of captivity doesn't mean his story pauses. It means it accelerates. Because EJ doesn't process trauma the way other people do. He doesn't reflect quietly. He doesn't heal openly. And he certainly doesn't forget. What he does is recalibrate. So yes, EJ is going to have a lot to catch up on after the crypt. But the most important thing he'll be thinking about isn't what he missed. It's what he learned. Captivity strips away illusion. It reveals who panics, who adapts, who watches silently and waits. And EJ watched everything. That's why his secret project matters more now than it did before. If Days of Our Lives is doing what it usually does with EJ, then this project won't disappear. It will evolve. Captivity may leave EJ more paranoid, seeing threats everywhere. More ruthless, deciding hesitation is weakness. More obsessive about control, because control was taken from him. But there's another possibility. EJ may come out, momentarily vulnerable. And that's the most dangerous version of him. Because with EJ Demera, vulnerability doesn't lead to confession. It leads to strategy. It leads to contingency plans. Backup alliances. Quiet moves made while everyone else is still celebrating survival. So the real warning sign for viewers isn't what EJ says after the crypt. It's what he does when no one is watching. Because this week likely won't reveal the full scope of his plan. It will simply reignite it. And once EJ decides the world is unsafe, he doesn't wait for the next attack. He builds one. Now the tone shifts. Because Days is deliberately giving us emotional whiplash. Just as the crypt storyline reaches its aftermath, the show pulls us into holiday spaces, living rooms, kitchens, familiar traditions. But these moments aren't peaceful. They're charged. Let's start with Chanel and Johnny. Chanel's pregnancy isn't revealed as gentle joy. It lands as a shock. And that distinction matters. This isn't framed as a long-planned step forward. It's framed as a sudden reality check. And for Johnny, that kind of news doesn't just spark happiness. It sparks questions. Am I ready? What does this change? What kind of man do I need to be now? On Days of Our Lives, pregnancy storylines are rarely about the baby alone. They're about identity, legacy, responsibility, and whether love is strong enough to survive pressure. Johnny's reaction will tell us everything about where this couple goes next. Now contrast that with Chad. Chad DiMera reunites with his children just in time for Christmas. And the Horton tree trimming gathering, featuring Chad, Thomas, and Charlotte, isn't just a feel-good scene. It's emotional punctuation. Because think about the symbolism. Chad emerges from a crypt, a place of death, secrecy, and fear, and steps directly into a room filled with light, memory, and family. The world tried to bury him. But the people who love him are still here. That kind of moment doesn't close a chapter. It rewrites it. Chad won't walk away from that experience unchanged. If anything, it may harden his resolve. Because once you nearly lose everything, you stop taking stability for granted. And then we get the returns. Lucas Horton, Lonnie Price Grant, Eli Grant. On the surface, these are holiday homecomings. Familiar faces, warm reunions, nostalgia. But Days of Our Lives doesn't stack returns like this by accident. When multiple characters come back in the same week, it's not about closure. It's about positioning. Returns often signal one of three things: old conflicts being reopened, just when everyone thought they were settled. New alliances forming quietly in the background. Or long-term storylines being seeded under the cover of holiday warmth. Christmas, on Days, is camouflage. It softens the moment so the audience doesn't immediately see the setup. So don't be surprised if these returns begin with hugs and end with unresolved tension. Because Days of Our Lives loves to remind us of one thing: peace in Salem is never permanent. Sometimes it's just the calm before the next reveal. And now we reach the most deceptive moment of the week. The moment that looks harmless, festive, almost sweet. A mistletoe kiss. Sarah Horton is swept into a kiss with Brady Black. In any other town, it might be dismissed as tradition. In Salem, it's a warning shot. Because if you're Xander Kyriakis, this isn't cute. It's a threat. It tells him something he cannot ignore. Another man is close to Sarah. And it happened publicly. Under the guise of innocence. Spoilers say Xander's jealousy intensifies. And that phrasing matters. This isn't a brief flare of anger. This is a spiral. Because jealousy, especially Xander's kind, doesn't stay emotional. It becomes strategic. And here's why this kiss is so dangerous from a storytelling perspective. A mistletoe kiss is the most deniable form of betrayal. People can argue both sides with equal conviction. It didn't mean anything. It was tradition. It just happened. But the opposing argument is just as strong: you didn't stop it. You didn't pull away. You crossed a boundary, whether you admit it or not. That ambiguity is gasoline. Because ambiguity gives jealousy room to grow. And jealousy follows a very familiar path on Days of Our Lives. First comes insecurity. Then comes control. Control leads to confrontation. And confrontation leads to consequences. So the real question isn't whether Xander gets angry. It's how he attempts to regain power. Does he tighten his grip on Sarah emotionally? Does he target Brady directly? Or does he make a move so calculated that no one realizes it's retaliation until it's too late? Because Xander doesn't just react. He escalates. And that brings us to Brady. Brady isn't in a position of strength right now. He's emotionally exposed. He's carrying guilt over Rachel. He's navigating complicated loyalties. He's searching for connection in a moment of exhaustion. And that makes him dangerous, not out of malice, but vulnerability. Emotionally exposed people don't plan to cross lines. They drift across them. So this kiss may be the start of something neither Brady nor Sarah intended. But intention doesn't matter in Salem. Impact does. And Xander may be the one who decides what that impact becomes. So yes, this is technically a holiday week. But narratively, it's a reset. The crypt opens, but the damage doesn't disappear. Captivity ends, but suspicion survives. Family reunions happen, but relationships bend under pressure. Returns quietly redraw the social map. Secrets regroup instead of dissolving. And one seemingly innocent kiss sets off a chain reaction that could last far beyond Christmas. This is the kind of week where Salem doesn't explode all at once. It fractures. And fractures are harder to repair. So now the question shifts to you. Is Peter Blake truly a victim of the crypt, or is he more connected to this nightmare than anyone wants to admit? And will Holly ultimately understand Tate's choice to stay behind for Rachel, or is that decision the first crack in their relationship? Let me know your theories in the comments. If you enjoy Deep Dive Days of Our Lives analysis, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the holiday glow is fading. And what comes next for Salem won't be peaceful. It'll be